This is a relatively cheap laptop, and cheap often means it comes with flaws. Let's talk about that. It's the new version of the Gigabyte G5, which in this configuration features the 75-watt version of the RTX 4060 and an Intel i5 12500H with 4P and 8E cores and a total of 16 threads. It's most likely going to be one of the cheapest RTX 4060 laptops worldwide, but as always, that depends on where you live. In this configuration, it furthermore comes with 16GB of DDR4 3200 MHz RAM, yeah, I know, a small but very fast 512GB SSD with up to 4GB per second in writing speed and 5.5GB per second reading speed, a 15-inch Full HD display, a very tiny 150-watt PSU, and in this configuration, no Windows license. The price is going to be around €1,150 or $1,100 if we are not considering local deals. It will also be available with an RTX 4050, and that config will probably start below $1,000, but as far as I'm aware of, that will only have 8GB of RAM, which is ridiculous. So don't buy that version unless you plan to upgrade the RAM immediately. I also read that in the US, the RTX 4060 version is also only sold with 8GB, which again would be absolutely ridiculous. PS, if you're not subscribed yet, this is your chance to do so. Thanks. As you can see, Gigabyte is once more using a basic Clevo design with some generic gamerish design elements. Clevo is a laptop manufacturer that companies like Gigabyte use to configure and rebrand their own laptops. And the G5 is once more built that way. It's a full plastic case with a rather wobbly screen and a mediocre build quality. You can open it with one hand though. The bottom follows a bit, as you can see. It takes around 7 to 9 seconds to wake up from sleep mode, which is very long compared to other laptops I've tested lately. It's pretty lightweighted with only 1.9 kilogram, and the AC adapter weighs an additional 450 gram, making a total of 2.35 kilogram, which is clearly not a lot. So that's a plus. The display is one of the laptop's weaker points. It's a 16:9 Full HD screen with 144 Hz and no G-Sync or adaptive sync. And I've measured a maximum brightness of around 285 nits with my Spider X Pro. The color accuracy wasn't very good, as you can see here. It seems to be one of the basic displays we've seen in many cheaper gaming laptops over the last years. I mean, it's not terrible and most people will be perfectly fine with it. The keyboard has a full numpad and only one RGB zone, which you can configure in the Gigabyte control center. There are no color animation modes though, and keyboard flex was noticeable and it feels cheap, but to be fair, I was able to achieve a good writing speed. It looks cool with the matte black keys and the white sides. The touchpad size is alright, but it's just a tiny bit too far to the left, and for some people that could mean that they actually touch it while playing with the WASD keys. And the needed click force seemed a bit too high for my taste. The keyboard also offers a key to deactivate the integrated camera, and another plus is that the WASD keys don't get hot in longer gaming sessions. But to be honest, the overall build quality is a bit disappointing. It's very mediocre, and laptops like the new Asus TUF models and the Lenovo Legion 5 surely are built in a more sturdy way. It's more comparable to an MSI Katana or an Acer Nitro 5, but that was expected due to the price. On the left side, we are getting a USB 2, a USB 3.2 port, and a microphone jack and an audio jack, as well as a Kensington lock. At the back, we are getting a USB-C 3.2 port, an HDMI port, a mini display port, and the power plug. On the right side, we are getting a LAN port, another USB 3.2 port, and a microSD slot. By the way, this is what the integrated camera looks like and the integrated microphone sounds like. The fans never turn idle when the laptop is plugged in, even when using the silent mode. They only turn idle on silent mode when the Gigabyte G5 is unplugged. I've tested the benchmarks of Cyberpunk 2077 and Shadow of the Tomb Raider on Ultra at the native 1080p resolution to compare the speed of 3 of the 4 performance modes. Whereas the battery saving mode would deactivate the Nvidia GPU, so I ignored that one. Basically, performance mode and entertainment mode aren't any different in both performance and loudness. The silent mode is indeed silent, but it will drastically lower the performance to around 50% with a huge hit on the 1% low FPS due to the very low CPU speed it causes. You can also manually adjust the fan speeds to your liking in the control center, which would be nice if we could actually choose the fan speed at 100 degrees Celsius, which we can't because as a result in reality the fans will spin up to 100% anyhow, since the CPU is always getting that hot in heavier tasks and gaming. So adjusting fan speeds just doesn't do shit. That means there is no way to lower the fan noise in gaming, which is a huge letdown as the Gigabyte G5 is actually getting pretty loud in-game if you're not using the silent mode. The only way to prevent this would probably be to maybe lower the settings a bit, then cap the FPS below the maximum FPS and undervolt the GPU. That way you could possibly lower the fan noise a bit depending on the game you play. Actually, I also saw a power usage of 165 watt in games according to my watt meter, which is a bit unsettling in my opinion considering the 150 watt AC adapter. The laptop has 4 air vents as well as a big grid at the bottom. Unfortunately, I have to say that the laptop's cooling system is definitely too weak to handle the power and heat output. If I was Gigabyte, I would probably not advertise this with it being a WindForce cooling system as they do. Other laptops I recently tested handled this way better with still delivering a good performance and much less noise using their balanced or performance modes. PS, I was later checking on the temperature of each core during a Cinebench R23 run and noticed that only one of the 4 P cores actually hit the 97 to 99 degrees Celsius mark. So maybe my unit came with a somewhat faulty CPU that is having a big impact on the performance and fan speeds. If you own this laptop, please let us know in the comments if you're experiencing the same temperatures and fan speed noises as I did. The 2 downward facing 2 watt speakers are by far the worst laptop speakers I might have ever had in a review. The loudness isn't the issue, but the sound quality is so bad. My mediocre $250 Honor 20 smartphone from 4 years ago has a much better sound. It's so ridiculous, I actually recorded the difference for you. So listen. The 52 Wh battery in the Gigabyte G5 can't provide good runtimes. On idle with 20% brightness and Wi-Fi, I got a runtime of only 6 hours. Watching YouTube, I only achieved a very short 3.25 hours with 50% display brightness and headphones at 20% loudness and activated Wi-Fi, as the whole system still uses around 16 watt doing so. And gaming on battery is basically impossible as the performance drops to an extent that renders most games unplayable, even at lower settings, so I didn't really measure that one. In Cinebench R23 I got up to 13,765 points on the multi-core and a very high 1,729 on the single-core score, which is decent for the i5 12500H. After a few runs, the multi-core score drops to around 11,700 due to the earlier mentioned thermal throttling. In PCMark10 I saw up to 6,900 points plugged in and 4,600 on battery when using the performance mode. The overall gaming performance is lower than on other RTX 4060 laptops due to the lower 75 watt TDP of the GPU and the slower DDR4 RAM. I made a dedicated video in which I compare it to the 105 watt version, RTX 4060 on the MSI Katana 17 I've tested earlier this year, so check that out afterwards. In this video you can see that the RTX 4060 often only reaches 65 watt on this laptop. The performance is more comparable to an RTX 4050 with 85 watt and above. And actually in some games a full powered RTX 4050 can be even a bit faster. The only benefit of the 4060 in this case would then be the 2 GB bigger VRAM size of 8 GB and the fact that it uses around 10 to 20 watt less.
Before we're talking about some games, I forgot to mention that you can add a second M.2 SSD as the Gigabyte G5 offers a free M.2 slot. And no, it doesn't have a MUX switch, neither in the control panel nor the BIOS. In Hogwarts Legacy, I was using the full feature set of the Ada Lovelace generation, aka RTX 4000 series. At the high preset with activated DLSS on quality mode and frame generation, I saw a very high average FPS of 119 FPS with very low 1% low FPS of 29, despite the most recent patch. The game still does have issues with stuttering. On some systems it's better, on some it's worse. But despite the high average FPS, I could clearly feel the stuttering from time to time. It does get a little bit better though after a while of gaming, or when you're spending more time in the same area. Capping the FPS at a lower frame rate would surely help to smoothen the frame rate to a more acceptable level. Until this is getting fixed one day. Well, maybe. In The Last of Us, I was getting an average of 84 FPS with a 1% low of 49 FPS on the high preset with activated DLSS on quality. Me personally would always use DLSS on a small 15-inch screen, since it's super hard to tell the difference compared to the native resolution on that screen size. The game was perfectly playable on the Gigabyte G5 with a pretty smooth frame time graph right from the start and no stuttering, as you can see here. In CSGO, I was testing the high preset and saw a high average of 258 FPS with a 1% low of 99 FPS. Once again, the relatively bad 1% low isn't noticeable and can be ignored in this game. Thanks to the 144Hz screen, you could perfectly play lighter esport titles like Overwatch, Apex Legends or CSGO on a competitive level, though unfortunately I wasn't able to find any information on the input latency of the screen, which can become a limiting factor despite the high monitor refresh rate. But overall, it's safe to say that you can play any existing game until today with 60 FPS or more on this laptop at 1080p. Or even at 1440p if the VRAM is not getting an issue.
Make sure to also check out the video in which I talk about the wattage issue of the RTX 4000 series. By the way, these are the 3D mark results I achieved on the Gigabyte G5. Overall, I definitely cannot recommend this laptop, especially for more than $1,000, despite the relatively good performance it has. But the cons are just way too noticeable. The unavoidable loud fan noise and CPU throttling issue due to the bad cooling system, the horrible speakers, the mediocre screen, the relatively slow RTX 4060, the short battery run times, the fact that they often sell it with only 8 GB of RAM, it's just too much. You should really only consider getting this laptop if it's really cheap and the only laptop you could afford in your country. If you consider getting it, please be aware of the issues. That's all for today. If you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing and hit that like button. That helps a lot. Thanks for watching, see you next time, bye bye and cheers.